10:11 now streaming studio. Hope everyone is having a nice Friday afternoon. We've almost made it to the weekend, although it is going to be a pretty warm one. Today is our regularly scheduled segment, Inside the Story with the Flatwater Free Press, which again we try and do every Friday afternoon at around 2 o'clock. And again, do a deep dive into one of their latest pieces. Again, as always, they turn out a ton of great, especially investigative content. And today, a topical issue kind of concerning some Nebraska politics. And so, again, the story was written by Sarah Gensler with the Flatwater Free Press. You can find this story on the Flatwater Free Press's website, flatwaterfreepress.org. It's also posted on 1011now.com, where this live stream is currently also going on. It's also live on our YouTube channel. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure you do that. Again, you'll find a lot of great content there. But without further ado, we're going to bring in a managing editor with the Flatwater Free Press, Ryan Hoffman. Ryan is joining us again today from home. He does have some kids in the background, so if you hear some loud noises, that's what's going on there. But Ryan, again, I already told you I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old at home, so I'm no stranger to stuff like that. But we have another good story today. Can you kind of give us some details on what we're talking about today?
Yeah, so this story really grew out of some public records requests that, as you mentioned, our state government watchdog reporter, Sarah Gensler, had submitted to the governor's office, and she was essentially looking for all the emails that the governor had sent since taking office in January. We have a new governor. It was an interesting legislative session, which pretty much was underway right when he came into the office. And so she had sent in this request for the emails. And during that process, she got a response that was atypical, I would say, in that they had invoked executive privilege as the reasoning for withholding 4 emails specifically. And that caught Sarah's attention because she had never heard of a governor using that. She's filed quite a few records requests during her time as a journalist in Nebraska. And had never come across executive privilege. So she started digging into that. She asked follow-ups. She started talking to a lot of people, and essentially what she came to learn is that executive privilege doesn't exist in state law. You can look at the statute, and it's actually pretty detailed in some spots. It spells out exactly, what is not considered public record. And nowhere there does it say the words executive privilege. Further, in talking with a half dozen folks, former officials, current officials, advocates, people who are very familiar with submitting public records requests in Nebraska, none of them had ever heard of a governor invoking executive privilege to withhold records. And further, former Governor Dave Heineman also said he wasn't familiar with it. And Sarah actually went back and looked at the denial letters from his administration and couldn't find any that said executive privilege. So it's really a story about government access and government transparency. I should note that the governor's office says that they believe they're complying with the law. They believe that they do have the right to invoke executive privilege. They point to the fact that the U.S. Supreme Court has recognized that in some limited cases regarding the federal executive branch. And they point to the fact that governors in other states have also used it, which both of those things are true. But as far as we can tell, it has never been used in Nebraska before, and it doesn't exist in state law.
It's an interesting, because I think a lot of people would probably say they've maybe heard about executive privilege maybe on a federal level. I think, some of the things that have gone on between the president and Congress over the past couple of years, I think that phrase has been bandied about a couple times. But interesting one that it's never been used in the state of Nebraska, at least that you guys could tell up until this point. And two, that the words executive privilege do not exist in the Nebraska Constitution.
Correct. And it certainly is a phrase that has, I'd say, kind of reemerged in the public consciousness. And a lot of that comes from former President Donald Trump, invoked executive privilege in multiple instances. and even tried to assert it once he was out of office, which I don't think that question's ever been answered. But yeah, this whole notion came about from a Supreme Court, a U.S. Supreme Court decision during the Nixon administration, and that the court basically found that there are some limited instances where the president can invoke executive privilege, and there's rational reasons for doing so. And like I said, governors elsewhere have, especially in recent years, as the story notes, they tend to be governors from conservative states. But as one of the national experts we talked to said, historically, uh, this has been a nonpartisan issue. People from both parties, people in power, tend to find ways to uh, withhold some information. Um, so it certainly is something that I think most of us have heard more about. But yeah, it is interesting just to know that this is something that's never really been asserted, certainly in recent history in Nebraska, and it's not something that exists in state law. Some of the experts that Sarah talked with seem to think that if this did uh, you know progress to a court case or was advanced in some way, that the court might find some limited executive privilege, uh, but it wouldn't be this wide and sweeping, power to withhold documents.
And that was going to be my next question, is because Sarah talks about this in the article, which again is another long article, again well written, again a lot of people that she interviews in this article. But there's, hey, this is executive privilege because it's a personnel matter or it's an ongoing legal issue, versus I can just say executive privilege and I can withhold any document that I want for whatever reason that I want.
Right, right. And those are, among the, I think there's more than 2 dozen specific examples of records that can be withheld. Personnel documents are withheld all the time. I think, beyond salary and some pretty basic information, the exception there is pretty broad in terms of what can be withheld. Um, but to to assert this thing that doesn't exist there is somewhat troubling, and it's the combination of all these things, because the other aspect of this is that when a public agency or entity denies one of these requests, the state law requires that they cite the statute and kind of give a description of what they're withholding. And in this instance, the governor's office didn't do either of those things, despite Sarah asking. Uh, and it's the combination of all these things that I think troubled some of the, free press and government transparency advocates that Sarah talked to. It's not only the fact that the governor is withholding these documents, citing something that's seemingly never been used in Nebraska and doesn't exist in state law, and then on top of that, they're not providing a description of what exactly they're withholding, which is required by state law. So it's all those things in totality that have troubled some of the folks that Sarah talked to.
And including, again, former Governor Heineman. You mentioned him again. For those who don't remember, he was the Republican governor who served for 10 years from 2005 to 2015. Again, he's quoted here in the article saying, quote, "When you're governor, you're a publicly elected official and your records are subject to freedom of information requests, and we routinely complied with those. I think it's important because the public has a right to know what a governor is doing and the kinds of emails that we get," end quote. So, and again, later on down in the article, again, they talk about like, well, if we know our emails are going to be subject to scrutiny, I'm not going to send any emails. And it sounds like, again, the emails that you did get, again, Governor Pillen was sworn in January. It's August. It's been 8 months or so. It sounds like maybe he doesn't have very many emails. He's doing a lot of phone calls and in-person talks, which is a way to maybe kind of get around these FOIA requests and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. And the governor's spokesperson said as much, that that's just not how the governor does business. He doesn't communicate via email. Most communications from the public come in through an online portal, and then those things are distributed to staff accordingly. And if it needs to get to the governor, it gets to the governor. Um, so people can have different takes on whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, um, or whether it's an intentional act to try and skirt these disclosures. We certainly don't know that, but it's the fact that asserting a privilege that doesn't exist to withhold these documents, and I mean, not even describing what the documents are, poses its own issues, as several of the people in the story pointed out, that that is required by state law. But without them doing that, we have no idea what's being withheld, and there's probably a good chance they're like the other things being withheld, and they're completely innocuous. But we just don't know, um, what's in those emails.
And it's important. This is an important issue because again, as an elected official, it doesn't matter if it's the governor or whomever else it is. If you're an elected official, you're working for the people. People should be able to kind of see what you're doing. And again, we as the media, again, it kind of allows us to kind of hold elected officials accountable. Again, in the story, you guys mentioned Lieutenant Governor back in 2013 resigned after the World Herald found over 2,000 phone calls to women other than his wife on his state cell phone, because they got the cell phone records. And again, the World Herald back in 2021, after public records were released, officials knew Nebraska wouldn't be reimbursed for deploying state troopers to the Texas border, despite public statements suggesting otherwise. So again, it's people at home may think, well, why are you requesting all the governor's emails, or why are you requesting this, or why are you requesting that? Well, every now and then you find someone who's doing something they shouldn't be doing, right?
Exactly. I mean, it's really fueled a lot of some of the most consequential reporting. And that's not unique to Nebraska, but certainly the examples you cited. I think there's another example about inmates being improperly released, and that led to some real reforms within the last decade or so. So, these things matter, and it often seems like a little inside baseball, like, oh, this is the media talking about a media issue, but I mean, this is not, public records laws don't just pertain to reporters. This is about every Nebraskan's right to request documents from their government and have a little transparency. And I think there's one advocate in the story who said, the governor's not saying no to the Flatwater Free Press; he's saying no to 2 million people. So it may seem, you know like a little small ball, but it really is a consequential issue, and it's about government accessibility and transparency, and at Flatwater we feel like that's important, and people deserve to have that.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where 9 times out of 10 it may be like something you said, it's innocuous and it doesn't really matter, but 1 time out of 10 it might be a pretty big deal that a lot of people care about, that we need to know about. And it sounds like again, Senator Conrad, Danielle Conrad, again out of Lincoln, at least introduced a bill this last legislative session to maybe kind of put some language on the books regarding executive privilege, and it sounds like that didn't get out of committee. Do you know, are there going to be further efforts at all kind of in the future to maybe try and do something about this?
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure if the legislation, was specific to executive privilege. I think it was more broadly trying to clean up some of the public records language in state law, but that didn't advance out of committee because of the way the session and legislature works. It's still a live bill when they reconvene in January, so there's certainly a chance that it's not dead yet, but with it not advancing from committee, and who knows what priorities will be on the legislature's plate when they reconvene. So it's just hard to say if that bill has any momentum behind it, or if there will be any others that kind of come into the fray.
So, last question for you here, Ryan. What, as a news organization, again, obviously this matters to you guys. You guys are requesting the records, but when we turn around and we put out the story like, hey, Governor's maybe not giving us everything. What's your guys' goal with a story like this? Is it to be like, hey, we need to raise awareness, we need to try and change this? I guess if you kind of understand what I'm saying, like what's the goal with the story?
Right, right. I don't know that there's a specific goal other than to bring attention to it. Which is I guess the goal behind all the work we do. But it's like any other news story. It's something that is unusual. It catches our attention, and in our judgment, it has real consequences. Um, I think sometimes just because reporters tend to be pretty outspoken about transparency and accessibility. I think sometimes there's a notion that the media and reporters, they're looking for sorts of fights over access, and I can say with pretty good confidence that we don't want to get in these drawn out back and forth where we're trying to get something and the government's withholding it. No one wants to get into those protracted back and forth. It's a lot of time and energy on our part. It's a lot of time and energy on the agency's part. A lot of staff time. There's taxpayer dollars right there. But so our goal with the story is just to bring awareness to this issue, and if someone decides to take up the ball and run with it, whether that be legislation or something like that, that's in their purview. But I don't think we write a story like this with the goal of creating change. It's more so just to bring attention to the issue, which hopefully I think the story has successfully done.
Yeah, no, I think again, hopefully segments like this help to further that cause. So Ryan, again, it sounds like kid might be getting a little bit angry over there. So we'll go ahead and we'll let you go. Is there anything else we want to make sure we mention just before we let you go from this story?
No, I just appreciate you bringing additional attention to it, having me on, and tolerating my boss in the other room there, who's even editors need editors. He's a vocal one.
They're ready for the weekend, just like the rest of us are. So it's totally fine. I understand. All right, well, Ryan, awesome. Thank you again so much for joining us today. Again, we'll see you next time. All right.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. Take care.
You're welcome. Yep. All right. Again, that was Ryan Hoffman, managing editor with the Flatwater Free Press, again joining us. Again, the story that we're talking about is currently on the Flatwater Free Press's website, flatwaterfreepress.org, so you can see it there. You can also see it on 1011now.com. And again, you'll be able to rewatch this segment on 1011now.com as well. So again, as always, this segment every Friday at around 2:00. So again, kind of set your schedule for that. And again, as always, keep it tuned to 1011, both on air and online, for all of the latest news, weather, and sports. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. Hope everyone has a nice